Stop right there. What are you hiding under your shirt? The store manager's voice thundered across the crowded sporting goods store. Heads turned. A young black boy stood frozen in the aisle near the baseball glove section, clutching the hem of his old hoodie. I've been watching you the whole time. Don't play dumb, the manager snapped, marching toward him. He yanked up the boy's hoodie. Silence. There was nothing beneath it, except a bare, red, frostbitten hand. Whispers filled the air. Did someone call the police? He must have ditched it. Knew he looked suspicious. Above them, a small blinking red light on the ceiling camera quietly recorded everything. Boston, Massachusetts, 2:25 p.m. The wind bit harder than usual that afternoon, weaving through the cracked buildings of Dorchester like icy fingers, tugging at scarves and clawing through thin jackets. For Jamal Banks, 12 years old and determined, the cold was something he had learned to ignore, most days. He hunched over the handlebars of his scuffed-up bike, pedaling past piles of snow crusted with road salt. Each breath he exhaled turned to steam, and each turn of the wheel sent shudders through his numb fingers. In a battered shoebox tied with string and tucked beneath his arm, his treasure waited, a used pair of baseball cleats. They were scuffed, worn, and smelled like someone else's sweat, but to Jamal, they were priceless. Coach Rivers had given them to him 2 weeks ago with a hopeful smile and a promise. If you can get yourself a glove, son, you're on the team. That's all you're missing. That sentence had played in Jamal's head every day since, between math class and spelling tests, between dinner and sleep. He wanted it more than anything. Baseball wasn't just a game for Jamal, it was oxygen. It was one of the few things that made sense since his dad passed away last spring. Coach Rivers knew that. He also knew Jamal's mom was working 2 jobs, often not home until late at night, and that the rent was always one bad shift away from overdue. But Jamal didn't want sympathy. He wanted a glove. He pulled up to the alley behind the Bluebell Diner, where his mom worked the afternoon to closing shift. He chained the bike to a crooked railing and ducked inside, pushing past a curtain separating the kitchen from the back hallway. The warmth from the fryer hit him like a hug. "Boy, what are you doing here?" His mom, Maria Banks, asked with a frown. Her hands were covered in batter. She wore the exhausted expression of someone who'd been awake since 5 a.m. and hadn't had a real break since. "I came to ask something," Jamal said, opening his palm and revealing a handful of coins, mostly nickels, dimes, and a crumpled dollar bill. Maria looked down and sighed. "Jamal, baby, is this about that glove again?" He nodded. "It's on sale, Ma. I think I'm only like $6 short." $6 might as well be 600 right now, she said softly, brushing flour from her apron. "You know I would if I could." "I know," he whispered. There was no bitterness in his voice. He didn't need to be told about the electricity bill or the broken heater. He could see his mom's fingers cracking from scrubbing dishes all day. She leaned in, kissed his forehead, and said, "We'll figure it out." "Not today. But soon." Jamal didn't argue. He just nodded, stuffed the coins back into his hoodie pocket, and gave her a small wave before disappearing back through the curtain. The streets felt colder now. Not because the temperature had dropped, though it had, but because something in his chest had tightened. He pedaled toward Mattapan Square, where Dick's Sporting Goods stood like a glowing oasis in the gray landscape. He had passed the store 3 times this week already, peering through the windows like a kid in a movie. Today would be his 4th visit. He parked his bike near the delivery entrance and walked around front. As the automatic doors opened with a soft swoosh, warm air and the scent of new rubber and artificial turf filled his lungs. Inside, the store was bustling. College kids trying on running shoes, dads examining basketball hoops, a group of teenage girls giggling in the yoga section. Jamal kept his head down and his hands in his pockets, moving past the aisles like a ghost. He knew where the glove section was. It was in the back, near the baseball mannequins, beneath a big red banner that read, "Seasonal Clearance, up to 60% OFF." He stopped in front of the gloves. Row after row. Brands he couldn't pronounce. Prices he could never reach. And there it was. One glove. Rawlings Youth Series. On sale, $7.99. Still too much. Jamal reached out, brushing his fingers across the soft leather. It was warm, even just to the touch. His hand trembled a little, but not from the cold. He slid the glove on. Perfect fit. For the first time in days, he closed his eyes and imagined it, running across the field, catching a fly ball, coach nodding in approval. His teammates cheering. Maybe even his mom in the stands, clapping between shifts. Then he looked at his other hand. Red, dry, with a thin crack bleeding near his knuckle. The cold had been unkind. He slipped the glove off and placed it back on the hook. There was no plan anymore. Just instinct. He turned around and walked toward the door. The automatic doors slid open behind Jamal as he stepped out into the biting wind. The warmth of the store evaporated instantly, replaced by the harsh slap of December. But what made him stop wasn't the cold, it was the man. The old man sat hunched against the brick wall just to the right of the entrance, a plastic shopping bag beneath him as makeshift insulation. He wore 3 mismatched coats layered over each other, all frayed at the edges. His hair was gray and matted, his beard tangled with ice, and his hands were bare. Jamal couldn't look away. The man's fingers were curled in toward his palms, purple and raw from exposure. He trembled violently, whispering to himself in a voice too soft to hear. Most people entering the store walked past him without a glance. Jamal stood still, torn. His left hand reached into his hoodie pocket and touched the crumpled coins, his $2.47. Not enough to buy a glove. Not enough to change anything. Then he looked down at the glove still in his right hand. It was the one he had just tried on. He hadn't meant to walk out with it. Maybe he'd forgotten he was wearing it. Maybe he hadn't. But now, standing in front of this man, the choice felt different. Slowly, Jamal stepped closer. The man looked up, startled. His eyes were pale blue, rimmed with red, and clouded by cold and exhaustion. "I'm not gonna hurt you," Jamal said softly, kneeling. I saw your hands." The man blinked, lips chapped and trembling. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Jamal swallowed. The glove was still warm from his own hand. He reached out and gently took the man's left hand in his, then slipped the glove over it. "There," he whispered. "That's better, right?" The old man stared at the glove like it was something sacred. His fingers flexed slowly inside it. Jamal gave him a small smile, then stood up, brushing snow from his jeans. "I gotta go," he said. "Stay warm, okay?" The man nodded faintly, his eyes never leaving the glove. Jamal turned and walked back toward the store, toward the heat, the lights, the aisle where he'd found the glove. He figured he'd just put it back on the hook. Nobody had seen, probably. No big deal. But he didn't make it that far. "Stop right there. What are you hiding under your shirt?" The manager's voice rang out like a gunshot. Jamal froze. The people in the checkout line turned. The teenage employee by the shoe section looked up from his phone. The older couple browsing tennis rackets paused mid-conversation. And the manager, stocky, red-faced, and already angry, stormed toward Jamal, pointing. "You heard me, kid. I saw you near the gloves. What did you do with it?" "I didn't," Jamal started, but the man was already grabbing the hem of his hoodie. A rough yank. Cold fingers on his ribs. The hoodie lifted. Nothing there. Just a red, raw hand and a look of confusion and fear in Jamal's wide eyes. The manager's brow furrowed. Where is it? I gave it away, Jamal mumbled. What was that? The man barked. I said. I gave it to someone outside. The murmurs began. A woman in yoga pants shook her head. A tall man in a Patriots jersey muttered something about kids these days. Someone pulled out a phone. The moment became a spectacle. At the back of the store, Jake Mendez, 17, part-time employee, and currently hiding behind the returns counter, watched the scene unfold. He didn't know Jamal, but he'd noticed him before. Small kid. Always looking around. Never buying anything. Always touching stuff. Jake had seen that kind of behavior before. He'd been told to report it. But something about this felt off. He squinted, leaned toward the security monitor next to the cash register, and started rewinding the footage from the glove aisle. Meanwhile, Jamal sat on a bench near the registers, the store manager hovering nearby. He wasn't handcuffed, but he felt like he was. His cheeks burned, not from the cold, but from shame. He kept hearing the words again and again in his head. Thief. Liar. Suspicious. He wanted to disappear. Just then, the door opened, and two police officers stepped in, brushing snow from their jackets. One of them, a black woman with short braids, gave Jamal a long, silent look. We got a call about a suspected shoplifter, she said to the manager. The manager nodded eagerly. That's the kid. He had a glove, then it vanished. Swears he gave it to someone outside. Likely story. Jake appeared beside them, holding a USB stick. Actually, he said, you might want to see this first. The room was silent as the video played. On the screen, Jamal appeared, small, bundled in his hoodie, fingers trembling as he picked up the glove. The camera showed him sliding it on, flexing his fingers, pausing as if testing not just the fit but how it felt to belong. Then he slowly took it off. The footage continued. Jamal turned, looked around, then walked purposefully toward the exit. The camera above the door caught it all. A wide-angle view of the sidewalk, the automatic doors, and the old man huddled outside with nothing but crumpled newspapers around his hands. They saw Jamal step out. Saw him kneel. Saw him gently place the glove on the man's shaking hand. And then, the most unexpected part, the old man smiled. It wasn't a big smile, or one you'd see in a toothpaste ad. It was quiet. Tired. Grateful. The kind of smile that came from someone who hadn't felt warmth, not physical or human, in a long time. Jamal didn't speak. He didn't linger. He simply stood and walked back into the store. The clip ended there. No one said a word for a few seconds. Then Jake, the teenager who had pulled the footage, broke the silence. He didn't steal anything. The store manager cleared his throat. His cheeks were flushed, but not from the cold this time. I didn't know, he muttered. The taller of the two police officers, a white man with a tired expression and a thermos still steaming in his hand, glanced at Jamal, then back at the manager. You called us over this? I thought, he had a glove. And then. But he didn't keep it, the female officer interrupted calmly. He gave it to someone who needed it more. Jamal sat on the bench, silent. His legs dangled above the tile floor, too short to reach. He didn't lift his head. The manager looked at the boy, then at the officers, then at the small crowd that had gathered around the monitor. No one said it, but the judgment had shifted, and now, it was directed at him. I'd like to apologize, he said awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. I made a mistake. Still, Jamal didn't speak. The officer knelt beside him. You okay? He shrugged. Your name? Jamal. Well, Jamal, she said gently, you did something kind today. A lot of adults wouldn't have. Jamal looked up, finally. I didn't want him to be cold. The officer smiled. That's a better reason than most people have for anything. The store manager rubbed his temples. Let me get you the glove back. No, Jamal said quickly. It's his now. The crowd had begun to disperse, but the impact lingered. A mother who had been watching quietly with her daughter gave Jamal a warm smile as she left. Another man clapped Jake on the shoulder. You did the right thing, kid. Jake looked down at the screen, still paused on the image of Jamal kneeling by the old man. He had almost missed it. Had almost been a part of the assumption. He thought of how easy it was, how normal, to misjudge someone just because of what they looked like. A small black kid in a hoodie. Alone. Not buying anything. Easy to label. But wrong. So wrong. Jake turned to the manager. Maybe we should do something. Like what? I don't know, Jake said. Something better than calling the cops on a kid who did the right thing. An hour later, Jamal was outside again. He hadn't asked for anything. Hadn't taken anything. But Jake had followed him out, holding a small paper bag. Hey, Jake said, jogging to catch up. Wait up. Jamal turned, hesitant. Jake held out the bag. It's yours. The glove. New pair. Paid for. Jamal blinked. Why? Because sometimes people screw up, Jake said. And because what you did, that mattered. Jamal took the bag with both hands. Thanks. Jake shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. You play baseball? Jake nodded. Yeah. I'm trying to get on the team. Jake smiled. You will. The next morning, snow fell soft and slow over Boston like powdered sugar dusting the city. The streets were quiet except for the muffled crunch of boots and the low hum of early commuters. Jake Mendez stood behind the customer service counter at Dick's Sporting Goods, sipping his too-hot coffee and staring at the front doors. He kept glancing at the space near the sidewalk, the exact spot where the homeless man had been yesterday. Empty. He didn't know what he expected. That the man would still be there. That he'd wave, or nod, or maybe even come inside. Jake sighed. Nothing magical ever happened twice in a row. Hey, Jake, one of his coworkers called. Manager wants to talk to you in the break room. Jake braced himself. Maybe this was about yesterday. Maybe he had crossed a line, pulling footage without permission, even if it had changed everything. When he entered, the store manager was there, along with Lauren, the assistant manager, and a clipboard on the table. I've been thinking about what you said, the manager said without preamble. About doing something. Jake stayed quiet. We can't undo what happened to that boy. But, maybe we can start fixing something else. Lauren turned the clipboard around. On it was a sign, handwritten in bold black marker. Give a glove, give warmth. Donate gloves for those in need. Collection box located near the entrance, ***. Jake raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Absolutely. I even called corporate. They said we can match donations. For every pair donated, we'll give one from store stock. Jake couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. That's kind of amazing. And, the manager added, clearing his throat, I was wondering if you'd help set it up. Coordinate it, maybe. You started this. Jake blinked. Me? No one else had the guts to press play. That weekend, the donation box appeared at the front of the store. Big. Bright. Decorated with red ribbon and paper cutout snowflakes. Above it was a printed photo, a still from the security camera, showing the moment Jamal slid the glove onto the homeless man's hand. They didn't name Jamal. Didn't need to. The image spoke for itself. Customers started dropping in with bags. Wool gloves, leather ones, mittens, even full winter kits. Some brought new items. Others handed over gently used pairs, happy to contribute. One elderly woman brought in 15 pairs, some handmade. "My late husband used to keep a box in his truck just for this," she said. "He always said, 'Warm hands, warm hearts.' When I saw your sign, I knew I had to do something." The local newspaper showed up next. Then a radio station. Then Channel 5. Jake stood awkwardly in front of the camera as a reporter asked, "So where did this idea come from?" Jake scratched his neck. "From a kid who gave something when he had nothing. And reminded all of us what giving really means." Meanwhile, Jamal had no idea any of it was happening. He had returned to his routine, school, helping his mom at the diner, practicing with the borrowed cleats behind the apartment building. He hadn't dared return to the store. Not because he was angry, but because he thought he'd caused trouble. When Coach Rivers finally asked if he had found a glove, Jamal just nodded and held up the new one. "Nice," Coach said. "You ready for tryouts next week?" Jamal grinned. More than ready. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the story was spreading. That people across the city were passing around the image, the moment, the lesson. That his quiet act of kindness had sparked something warmer than a glove ever could. Back at the store, Jake sorted through a pile of donations when someone tapped his shoulder. He turned to see a man, tall, lean, weathered, with a long gray beard and a familiar pair of eyes. It took Jake a second to place him. The homeless man. But cleaner now. His coat still patched, but he had a scarf. Gloves on both hands. One of them, the very glove Jamal had given him, was wrapped in plastic, hanging from a cord around his neck like a badge of honor. "I heard about the box," the man said, voice raspy but clear. "Didn't know people still noticed folks like us." Jake swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's because of you. And a kid. Do you know his name?" The man shook his head. "Didn't ask. Didn't seem like he wanted thanks." Jake nodded. "That sounds like him." They stood in silence for a moment. "I go by Henry," the man said finally. "Used to be a mailman, before things went sideways." Jake extended a hand. "I'm glad you came back, Henry." The old man smiled. "You tell that kid of yours, that glove saved more than just fingers." Jamal wasn't used to being called to the principal's office, not unless it was for something like helping carry lunch trays or fixing the computer cart. So when Ms. Howard, the school secretary, appeared at the door of his sixth period class and asked for him, everyone's head turned. "Principal Gaines wants to see you," she said, smiling in a way that was more curious than stern. Jamal blinked, surprised. "Did I do something?" "No," Ms. Howard said with a wink. "But I think someone else did." Principal Gaines handed him an envelope the moment he stepped into the office. It was thick, white, and formal-looking, with his name typed neatly on the front, Jamal Banks. Inside was a folded letter with a store logo at the top, Dick's Sporting Goods, and a message. "We would like to honor your generosity and quiet heroism with a small gathering this Friday at 5 p.m. You've inspired more people than you can imagine. Please come, if you're comfortable. No speeches required. Just your presence is more than enough. Sincerely. The Dick's Sporting Goods team." Underneath the printed text was a handwritten note in blue pen. "P.S. The glove box is full, and growing. Thanks to you. Jake." Jamal stared at it for a long time. His stomach twisted, not out of fear, but disbelief. He had tried so hard to avoid attention his whole life. Now strangers were inviting him to events. He wasn't even sure he belonged. But when he told his mom, she said only one thing. "You do belong. And it's time they see that." Friday arrived quicker than he expected. At 4:45, Jamal pulled on his best hoodie, the one without holes, and his cleanest pair of jeans. His mom had washed them the night before. They smelled like lavender detergent. They walked to the store together, hand in hand, boots crunching in the snow. Jamal felt his pulse quicken with every step. As they approached the front doors, he noticed something different. A line of people stood along the sidewalk. Not waiting to shop. Just waiting. For him. When the automatic doors slid open, the entire front section of the store was transformed. The glove display was gone, replaced with a wide platform lined with winter gear, donation boxes, and handwritten signs like "Gloves equals warmth." Inspired by Jamal. One act can change a city. Cameras were everywhere, local news, social media influencers, and parents with phones. The store buzzed not with transactions, but celebration. And standing at the center of it all, beside the donation wall that now stretched the length of the shoe section, was him. The homeless man. But not homeless anymore. Henry wore a clean coat and new shoes. His beard was trimmed. His scarf was deep green. Around his neck still hung the plastic sleeve that held the glove Jamal had given him. When their eyes met, Henry stepped forward slowly. "You probably don't recognize me," he said, smiling gently. "I do," Jamal replied. "I remember your hands." Henry chuckled, his eyes misting. "I remember yours, too. They were the warmest thing I'd felt in years." Then, before Jamal could say anything else, Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and read aloud. "Kindness is not a performance. It's what you do when no one's watching." He looked up. "That's what this young man taught me. And all of you." A hush fell over the room. Even the kids stopped scrolling their phones. Then applause. Soft at first, then rising. It wasn't loud, flashy, or staged. It was real. From people who had seen the video. Heard the story. Or just walked by the store that day and saw a kid do something that shouldn't have been extraordinary, but was. Jamal looked down at the floor, unsure of what to do with the sudden flood of attention. Jake stepped beside him. "You okay?" "I don't like being on camera," Jamal muttered. "Don't worry," Jake grinned. "They're not here for a show. They're here because you made something better." Then Jake reached into a bag and pulled out a brand new baseball glove, premium leather, stitched in red, still shining. "This one's from us," he said, handing it over. "Not because you need it. But because you earned it." Jamal took the glove and turned it over in his hands, eyes wide. It was better than anything he had ever dreamed of. "Thanks," he whispered. Then he looked up at Jake. "But I don't want to keep it if someone else needs it more." Jake shook his head. "You're allowed to have good things too, Jamal." He paused. "And you've already given enough." By the end of the evening, the donation wall had reached over 600 pairs of gloves, and counting. More importantly, a new fund had been started, seeded by a donation from the store's regional manager, the Jamal Banks Winter Fund. Its goal: to provide gloves and warm gear for underprivileged families in Boston every winter. And Jamal, the boy once accused of stealing, was now the face of giving. But to him, none of that mattered as much as the quiet moment he shared with Henry near the back exit, where it had all started. "Do you have a place now?" Jamal asked. Henry nodded. "Shelter's got me a spot. Social worker, too. Even asked if I'd share my story at schools." "You will?" Henry smiled. "If you can be brave, so can I." They shook hands. Then hugged. Just once. But it was enough. 2 weeks had passed since the night Jamal stood in the spotlight, unknowingly becoming the symbol of a movement. The glove drive continued to grow, now spreading beyond Boston. Other Dick's Sporting Goods locations across Massachusetts and even neighboring states had picked up the initiative, inspired by the simple idea, give a glove. Give warmth. But for Jamal, life had returned to something close to normal, at least on the outside. He still rode his bike past cracked sidewalks, still helped his mom fold napkins at the diner, and still practiced baseball in the snow-dusted alley behind their building. But something inside had shifted. He walked a little taller. Smiled a little more. People at school whispered his name, but it wasn't the kind of whisper that hurt anymore. Then, one afternoon after school, he came home to find a package on the steps of their apartment door. It wasn't big. Just a simple manila envelope with his name written in careful handwriting. There was no return address, just a single stamp and a faint postmark, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. "Did you order something?" his mom asked as she stirred a pot of soup in the kitchen. "No," Jamal replied, curious. He sat at the table and gently opened it. Inside was a letter and a photo. He read the letter first. "Dear Jamal. My name is Leo, and I'm 12, just like you. I saw your story on the news. My mom showed it to me when I got home from school. She cried when she watched it. I didn't. But I did something else. At my school, there's a kid named Devin. He always wears the same hoodie every day. He's quiet, and nobody talks to him. Not even me. After I saw what you did, I brought an extra pair of gloves to school. Not store-bought, just ones I had that were still okay. I left them in Devin's locker with a note that said, 'Stay warm. From someone who sees you.' The next day, Devin was wearing them. He looked up at me in the hallway and nodded. He didn't smile, but it was something. So thank you. You didn't just help someone in Boston. You helped someone in Wisconsin too. Your friend. Leo K." Jamal stared at the letter, his eyes reading it over and over again. He turned to the photo, a snapshot of 2 pairs of gloves, his own, the one from the store photo, taped to the wall in Milwaukee Elementary, beside Devin's gloves. Beneath them, a handwritten sign read, "Kindness is catching." He swallowed hard. "I think you have mail," he said quietly to his mom. She dried her hands, came over, and read the letter silently. Her face softened, eyes glistening. "You see this?" she said, gently resting her hand on his shoulder. "This is what a leader does." Jamal blinked. "I'm not a leader." She leaned down so they were eye level. "Yes, you are. Not because of the glove. But because you acted when no one was watching. You saw someone hurting and you helped. The rest followed. That's what makes a real leader, not the speeches, not the camera. The moment no one sees." Jamal nodded, quiet. But her words echoed. That weekend, Jamal asked his mom if he could take a detour on their way to the laundromat. She agreed, and they biked together to the sporting goods store. The donation wall was even larger now, nearly 2 full aisles of gloves, coats, scarves, and hats stacked in clear bins, organized by volunteers. A sign now read, "Over 3,000 items donated, and counting." Jake spotted them from behind the counter. "Jamal." he called out, walking over. "Didn't think we'd see you again." Jamal handed him the envelope from Milwaukee. "You gotta read this." Jake scanned the letter, and by the time he was done, he let out a long, slow whistle. "This is amazing," he said. "We should put it on the wall." Jamal nodded. "But not with my name on it. Just the message." Jake smiled. "Got it." They pinned it up near the original photo, where people could see how far a single action had traveled. Spring arrived slowly in Boston, the snow giving way to slush and early buds. Tryouts came and went. Jamal made the team, not because of the glove, but because of his hustle. His focus. His heart. Coach Rivers pulled him aside after practice one day. You got a good arm, Banks, he said, tossing him a ball. But more than that, you've got character. That's what teams are built on. Jamal grinned. Thanks, coach. Oh, and one more thing, coach added. We're ordering new uniforms. You get to pick your number. Jamal paused. Can I choose the number 12? Sure, coach said. Any reason? Jamal nodded. Just someone I met, same age. Help me remember this ain't just a game. On the first day of the season, as Jamal jogged onto the field in his new uniform, his mom sat in the bleachers holding a folded piece of paper in her lap. The letter from Leo. And beside her sat someone she hadn't expected, Henry. Clean-shaven. Wearing a Red Sox cap. Clapping with his gloves on. I wouldn't miss this, he said, smiling. As the umpire shouted play ball. Jamal stepped into position, his new glove on one hand, the Milwaukee photo taped inside his locker back at school, and a story in his heart that he hadn't told many people. Because this wasn't about fame. Or redemption. Or even a mistake that got corrected. It was about a quiet moment, a freezing afternoon, and a single act of kindness that went further than he ever imagined.